We must search for what is truth.
You doubt me.
Seek truth. What is truth? And what is God?
The first duty is to the truth, whether it's scientific truth, or historical truth, or personal truth.
Then here is the proof you seek.
You don't really want an answer to that question.
Welcome to the AxPx podcast, honest conversations about faith, doubt, disbelief, hope, and everything in between. I am your host, Sean DeRager. I want to thank all of the new listeners that have joined up and subscribed. If you'd love to leave a little 5-star review over at iTunes, it'd be insanely welcomed, or on Stitcher or Google Play, wherever you listen. If you can rate the show, that'd be fantastic. You can follow us on Twitter and join the conversation there at the AxPx. We're also on Facebook, and I throw this up on YouTube as well. You can find all those links over at theaxpx.com, as well as a link to our Patreon. If you like what we're doing and you want to send some support our way, it's only $1 a month. I do a little mini podcast each week called the AxPx Diaries, and it's something a lot more personal about my personal faith journey, things that I've realized through the week about myself, about my roller coaster ride, my tug of war with God and who God is. So I do that over at the AxPx Diaries, which you can get by becoming a patron saint. But let's jump into this week's show. I'm really excited about this next series that we're about to do, and I have a lot of great people lined up to talk to. So let's just jump right into this right now.
Hi, this is Joy. Feminism is not a ladies' issue. Feminism is a human rights issue. Men and women need to be concerned about feminism. So that's what I'm calling to say. The best thing we can do for feminism is to help people understand what it is. And what it is just making certain that you have the same rights no matter if you happen to be born female or born male. That's what feminism is. If you want to watch how it works, you need to become sensitive to looking at things like the Senate hearings and watching how Kamala Harris does not get to interrupt anybody or she's reprimanded. But the male senators can interrupt as often as they want without being reprimanded. If you are attuned to picking up on when feminism happens, you'll start to feel those things worse than chalk or fingernails on a blackboard. You will all of a sudden go, what is with that? So we need to train little boys and little girls both to understand what feminism is. Not just the ladies. Thanks for taking on the topic. It's an important one for all of us.
Recently on Twitter, a woman was frustrated that there weren't more progressive theology-focused podcasts hosted by women. I'd recently stumbled across the podcast Ezer Uncaged, hosted by Lauren R.E. Larkin and Sarah Taras, so I quickly recommended that podcast. In an attempt to add more theology or progressive podcasts hosted by women to the list, I realized that there weren't very many. Hell, most of my podcast episodes, I've interviewed men. With this episode, we begin a series I'm calling Ask Me About My Feminist Agenda, inspired by the events with the comic book Mockingbird's writer Chelsea Cain, in which she deleted her Twitter account after being harassed by men for creating a feminist hero. Mockingbird was far from the first feminist superhero, and we've seen more mainstream movies such as Star Wars: The Force Awakens, Rogue One, and most recently Wonder Woman embrace a strong heroine. In coming weeks, I hope to cover the many angles to feminism and its relation to our current society and culture. Today, I sit down with Ezer Uncaged host Lauren R.E. Larkin to discuss her reaction to what's been called the Billy Graham Rule. And then Sarah Taras joins me to discuss her new book, Women and Lust, dealing with female sexuality and the church. Today we're chatting with Lauren R.E. Larkin. Her website is Larkin.com. So, Lauren, welcome.
Hi.
The reason why I wanted you to come on the show was because, oh gosh, I'm having a brain blank on our vice president's name. Pence. Mike Pence. This is how much I try to block this administration from my brain.
I only remember it by doing trumpets. Because someone made a funny back in the during the election about Pence being chosen because the signs now read trumpets. The trumpet.
Well, a while back, I would say probably about a month and a half ago, he came out and said basically that he doesn't go out to dinner with any woman alone other than his wife. And, a lot of reactions kind of came back and forth from that. A lot of people on the far religious right were like, well, that makes sense. And then a lot of people on the liberal left were like, whoa, this is ridiculous. You're a weirdo. And so I started kind of getting in these conversations online back and forth. And for me, my stance was, well, like, that's something that he believes. He has the right to believe that. And I got in some conversations here and there with certain people who agreed or disagreed. And then, you had posted something on your Twitter, about the Billy Graham rule. And yes. This is a common thing in more of the evangelical circles. And I've dealt with this myself. We can get into this in a little bit. And so My main goal was to talk with you about that, but before we jump into the Billy Graham rule, if you can just have a chance to introduce yourself. You do have a podcast, Ezer Uncaged, that we definitely wanted to talk about, and just if you don't mind, just let everyone know a little bit about yourself and your background.
I hate talking about myself. I legitimately. If you don't ask me questions, you'll get nothing interesting. You'll get that I wake up at 4 a.m. and I go to bed at 9 and everything else in between is a wash. I will talk about Ezer Uncaged. My partner in crime there is Sarah Taras, and we are as thick as thieves on air and off air. The whole premise behind the podcast was using the research that I had done through my first master's degree, and combining sort of a lay voice with an academic voice. And so when we for the first part of the first season, you can kind of tell that there's I'm the academic and she's the layperson, but both of us, coming at certain texts that have typically been used to kind of oppress women, and re-examining them, and just sort of providing usually or often a new way to understand the scripture or the passage, or an alternate way of understanding it, or bringing to light some aspects of the original language or the original culture or whatever, where we get some of the language, and allowing the modern hearer to hear the passage in its cultural context, and then allowing the reader to maybe then, and guiding the listener, I should say, reader, the listener to maybe see it differently if we take it now into our context. Mm-hmm. So what drew you into studying, theology? Because it's something that I've always been interested in, but I never made the jump into actually studying theology. I don't come from a Christian household. Mm-hmm. At best, it's agnostic. My brother is actually a professing atheist. I'm the only Christian professing, I guess, Christian for, multiple generations. So what drew me to it wasn't some sort of like familial or traditional aspect. It was that my life fell completely apart while I was working on Wall Street. And it was just literally every aspect of it was falling apart. And I had a very significant come to Jesus moment. And about a year after that event, a year and a few months, I quit Wall Street and took an internship to do youth ministry at the church that I was attending. And during that time, I would voraciously read whatever books were in the youth pastor, also the assistant rector's office. The pastor or the rector of the church caught wind of it and thought, she's reading textbooks at this point. Maybe we should send her to seminary. So they talked to me about it, and I thought, I'm not really in this for anything else. I really like the aspect of theology. I was always prone to philosophy. The two sort of merged for me. And I said, well, you know what? My life right now is really directionless. So why don't we go ahead and do it? So I went off to seminary and earned a master's of divinity where I focused primarily on biblical studies. And then 2 years later, after the birth of my second son, I wound up going back and getting a master's of sacred theology where I focused on systematic theology, doctrine of justification, social justice, specifically our penal system and the death penalty, and really read into deeply Eberhard Jungel, a German theologian. Wow. I believe he's still kicking. He's pretty old now, but I think he might still be around. So that's how I got into it. I was never a good student in college. I went to an excellent school. I was your classic C student. And so I never thought I'd really go on to get more education. I didn't really like it. But something happened in that, I would say, conversion moment, I guess, where I just wanted to know more about this thing that had, in my opinion, had saved my life.
Very nice. And where specifically did you get your the degrees in theology from?
I went to Trinity School for Ministry, which is about 20 miles outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So go Steelers, go Penguins. And the Pirates, we just, go ahead. Go Pirates. Anyway.
And as far as like your church background, like church you're involved with right now, is it more the Episcopal Church? Is that correct?
That's actually the church that I'm ordained in. Okay. I currently attend, I'm in Western Colorado. I'm getting ordained through the Diocese of Central Florida. So there's a little bit of a conflict of interest. So I attend an evangelical Lutheran Church of America, ELCA. Okay. We have overlapping ecclesiastical, so I can help out.
Right, which is very much different from the evangelical terms that I kind of throw out when I'm talking about like more mainstream, Christianity, I guess. I don't know, because in college, my professor's wife, she's evangelical Lutheran, and her and I had a long talk about the differences between, she doesn't like the word evangelical being thrown around, because evangelical Lutheran is very much liberal, social justice, very open, gay affirming. It's fantastic. And whenever there's an election, everyone always talks about the evangelical. Yeah. There's a difference.
Very big, very big. A friend once said to me, I'll be evangelical as long as I can define it. And I think that's like the closest thing I'll come. I've told a number of people that I've, gone to school with and peers and stuff that I no longer associate with the term because of how it's been thrown around. And it is, I mean, the ELCA is the reason why I wanted to go to that specific church, or denomination, as opposed to, I study Luther. I've studied a lot of Luther, and I really like the way that Luther approaches preaching. And I wouldn't say that the church that I go to now is really excellent at delivering God's two words in classic Lutheran form. I could go to an LCMS church or a more conservative Lutheran church and get that exactly, but I didn't want to go there. I wanted to go to a church that did value equally alongside the gospel as a direct result of the gospel itself, not a secondary issue, but a primary issue, the components, the issues of social justice. And ELCA does make that primary rather than sort of a secondary falling out of your justification. Mm-hmm. So, I did choose that. And so yes, I'm, with the person that you were just speaking about, like it's a term that, well, I think it was back in early 2000s when the media got a hold of it. I thought, this is bad. This is not good. I had friends who were celebrating because I went to a fairly evangelical, conservative seminary, and people were so excited. And I thought, no. This is never good. It's never good when this happens. So,
well, because evangelical and the term itself is more being evangelizing, spreading the good news.
Exactly.
And spreading the news of separation and,
yes.
Bigotry and stuff like that is not necessarily good news.
Yes.
So,
not good news. Amen. Preach.
So we'll when I mention, I'm not going to say evangelical for this conversation. We'll say more like, I guess, conservative Christian circles, I guess. Great, is what perfect. I'll try to lean that way. It's hard because I always say evangelical.
Right. Well, and right now they call themselves evangelical. So the terminology that you're using isn't wrong. Right. It's just, is it worth fighting this fight that seems like a losing fight? Yeah.
What I love about the evangelical Lutheran was when I was going through a major deconstruction and kind of my breaking down my conservative Christian background, and coming out as gay affirming, like, and being very vocal about it. Like, gay marriage is totally fine. Like, it doesn't matter to me if you want, if you want to marry the person you love, go for it,
Right.
And I started getting a lot of, I've talked about this on the show, and I started getting a lot of, negative feedback from friends who knew me as conservative Christian. And the one thing that I really helped me was the Evangelical Lutheran Church had a write-up on their stance on being gay affirming. And it was very articulate, very thoughtful, and it really, really helped me. I have a PDF saved somewhere. It was something about sexuality. And
right.
That was a huge positive aspect that denomination, I guess, spoke into my personal journey and really helped me. So I have very fond things to say about the evangelical Lutheran. So.
Yes. And they're different all over the country. Now I live in Western Colorado, and Western Colorado I argue, is the burgundy of the red. So I made the mistake of talking about some more progressive concepts of politics, political theory. And I was confused because I was getting sort of blank stares. And later my husband was like, you forget that just because you're at an ELCA church, you forget that you're also in Western Colorado. You're not in a conservative environment. So you have to balance the two. So I was like, oh, okay, thanks.
Yeah. You always got to be aware of who's around.
Exactly.
Back to the main reason why I was interested in having you on. I mean, there's a lot of things. I've started listening to your podcast. I've read through some of your posts on your website. So there's a lot of things I think in the future we definitely can have some really fantastic conversations about. Cool. So I definitely want to keep that door open.
Good. I'm glad nothing I wrote made you slam the door.
Oh, no, not at all. It's great. And actually I forwarded some things along to my wife who, I married a strong, independent woman, and awesome. I have always, on your podcast, you say that you always felt more comfortable hanging around the boys, right?
Yeah, totally.
I always felt more comfortable, like when we're at a party and with friends in the neighborhood, I always end up at the table with my wife and her friends. And don't get me wrong, I like action movies, I like horror movies, like I feel like I'm a guy. I'm a guy, right? I'm interested in guy things. It's just, but on top of that, there's more that I'm interested in discussing. And of course, I'm always the guy who's bringing up politics and religion at a party. And, nobody really wants to discuss that at these parties. So, long way around. Where am I going here? So back to this Billy Graham rule. And you have a fantastic Twitter thread that I read. I think I was in the gym that morning, scrolling through your thread, and that's when I contacted you. I was like, wait, I need to get you on this podcast to talk about this. I'll let you set up what the Billy Graham rule is, and then we can go into kind of your thoughts on that and how it relates to this, this society, the current kind of climate that we're in with this administration.
Yeah. So, I only really know the Billy Graham rule through the whole hubbub about the Billy Graham rule and and reading that Washington Post article. I have to confess, I didn't get past that first paragraph because the way that the rule had been created and then sustained was so shocking to me that I couldn't read any further. And then that's when I jumped on Twitter and I had a thread where I deconstructed. So my understanding is that this story makes me laugh. So Billy Graham comes back from he's staying at a hotel and he comes back from some segment of a campaign or conference or preaching something or other that he's giving, and he opens up the door and there's this naked woman lying on his bed, and then he fled. He fled the room, fled the hotel, and from there devised that he would never travel, eat, dine, converse, associate with a woman, apart from his wife, Ruth. And to me, it's always been applauded, like his reaction to, kind of shun the opposite sex apart from his wife was this way of protecting himself from this really weird, random event, even though I think the article talked about how the woman may have been there to destroy his career. Yeah. And so what happens is Billy Graham is this notable preacher, pretty famous, right? A little bit influential. And so everyone gets wind of this rule and then they apply it to their own lives. And one of the things I thought was crazy is that you wind up destroying possible fruitful relationships with women out of fear. And now the gospel doesn't give us a spirit of fear, right? It gives us a spirit of freedom. And there should be wisdom, sure. But again, the article never said that this was, one of Billy Graham's closest female confidants of his entourage. It wasn't, there's nothing about this woman that's been revealed that is anything but that she was naked in his hotel room, maybe planning to try to destroy his career. But I don't understand how then shunning all future women from being in a possible close relationship with him now protects his career. It doesn't, the one-to-one there isn't working out for me, logically or rationally.
Yeah. Well, I think most guys, if they would walk into that situation, would be weirded out. I think right? most guys that I know, would be like, yeah, this is kind of weird. Not going to be, I'm not going to be a part of this later. Right.
Right. And
I don't think it could be just down to a religious thing.
Well, and I just the shock. As a woman, Sarah and I, we bond over. I don't know if you listened to our sex episode, but Sarah's written.
It's on the agenda.
It's on the agenda. But Sarah has written a wonderful small book that will be coming out at the end of July about lust in women and the freedom and the good word that the gospel brings to women who are trapped in sexual addiction and lust. And notoriously, like she and I both sort of bond over the fact that we're, women who enjoy our sexuality. We enjoy sensuality. And I, as a woman, if I had opened up the door with a pretty significant libido, like I opened up the door and there was a naked man on my bed, I would be weirded out. Like there isn't anything like I would run away too, because one, there's a stranger. Let's just emphasize stranger in the room. I get weirded out when, housekeeping knocks on the door, so to me, it's just, he fled and then he created this rule for himself out of fear. And then because women and the flight from women is so prominent, historically speaking, but even in the church, it's even very, very prominent, the flight from women. And I think actually Sarah has a wonderful moment on the flight from woman on Twitter. But it's so prominent in the conservative church that this woman is just out to destroy you using her sexuality, or even then not being sexual creatures, that you have to flee from her. And that's what Billy Graham did. He fled from her. Just out of fear. Mm-hmm. So the rule was devised out of fear, not out of some sort of, I'm going to sit down and, think about things. He just shunned women altogether. And it's not a beneficial rule, because what happened is that everyone else got a hold of it. And in the conservative petri dish, it becomes women are bad. And so no man should be around a woman because it's going to lead to sex. Mm-hmm. I don't understand how that's happened. I went to seminary. I was one of, like all my friends were male. I had sex with none of them, apart from the one I married. And we weren't even friends. Like, he wasn't even in my close-knit group of male friends. Mm-hmm. So no, a male-female friendship doesn't necessarily always lead to me showing up in one of their houses naked on a bed. I mean, it's just, I laugh, and I shouldn't, and I know affairs happen, but they don't happen because they can happen whether or not you shun off all women. I mean, it's just, you just wind up dragging and pushing that whole sexuality and sensuality so into the ground that it becomes very, what do I want to say? Alluring, even more alluring than if you bring it up and expose it and keep it in the light. Men and women are sexual creatures, whether or not it's homosexuality or it's heterosexuality. We do have attraction, but not all of it ends in fornication. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, and I think history is proven too. If you look at church history, especially recent church history, Jimmy Swaggart, there's not a lot of names aren't coming to my mind, but just locally in my area, pastors have had affairs, and it's happened with other churches I've been involved in the Midwest. Like, it does happen, and even these rules can't keep that from happening. And so it's like, what I would hope that a church would do would be to look past this rules and look more into, like, well, what does cause this type of thing from happening? I mean, I don't know. It's a lot more than just the opposite sex. I think there's some oversimplification going on here, and is still going on. And I'm hopefully going to talk to my wife about it, because she went to Bible college in Oklahoma. And there were a lot of weird rules, like they would take the women into a certain room and be like, okay, women, here's how you need to act, around the men in the school. I've had it happen with myself because I was involved with helping out with summer camps, and it was a co-ed summer camp. And, like I always do, I gravitate more towards the strong, smart women, because we just start talking, and there's nothing there. And of course, I get labeled as I flirted with the camp director's daughter award at the end of camp. And I'm like, there was no flirting. She's like, was my friend. And and this has happened to me quite a bit. And even I worked for a Christian clothing company, and we were at a sales event over a weekend, and me and one of the sales women we're just friends. Like, we had it off, our desks were next to each other. We had the same interest in music, and we were actually working together, and we went to a coffee shop to work, to send out emails, to do some inventory. And of course, I'm walking back to the hotel, and one of the other guys that we work with sees us. And of course, the next day I'm scolded because I'm putting, it's not about me. It's about, I'm putting her in a vulnerable situation.
Right. Because she's a weak woman, and she can't resist your masculine prowess.
Yeah.
Because she can't control herself. No woman can control herself around a man. I mean, sheesh. We're just helpless creatures.
And my wife knows what's going on. My wife knows me. I was on the phone with her during, it's frustrating how this gets oversimplified, and how people with good intentions are demonized by this kind of, I guess, fear of what the other person will do, of what other people will think. And here's my question to you about, because I was talking to a friend of mine over the weekend here, and he was involved with ministry for a while as well. And I mean, he told me that all this stuff is to, especially with pastors, right, is to flee the appearance of anything going on for other people. Like, do you feel like that's a valid, I guess, excuse for this type of thing? Or like, what are your thoughts on that?
I have a few thoughts. I mean, yes, I understand. I've heard that argument forever. This is why pastors will have the door open. If I were to go in and meet, well, my pastor right now, well, we don't really have a pastor right now, but she was a woman, so I can meet with her with the door closed, right? I've had male pastors.
Unless she's a lesbian, I don't know.
She's not. She's at least that we know of. At least that we know of. And she's not my type of woman anyway.
Okay, here we go.
I get it. I no appearance of anything, but I feel like that excuse itself is sort of placating the historical reasons for the Billy Graham rule. That like we're rather than confront and expose and to free humanity from this burdensome rule, we're saying things like, oh, to avoid the appearance of. You're just placating the rule. You're acquiescing to what the church is saying is the reality, and that's not the reality. The reality is that men and women can be friends without the appearance or the fear of appearances. So while I understand the excuse, I don't really want to give the excuse too much legroom to move, because I don't think it's going to do anything but placate and bring along with it the rule. So as soon as an affair happens between a pastor and a congregant, and again, I'm being gender neutral with my language here because it can be either way here. It'll be like, well, see, if we could just avoid the appearances, or if we could just avoid any of the temptation. The thing is that the temptation is more than just, I went to dinner with a male friend. There's more to that than just that. It's not, we need to stop saying that all dinners between a man and a woman, or a man and a man, or a woman and a woman, or a woman and a man, try to get all the combinations correct, are going to naturally lead to some sort of affair. That's not the truth. I've had females, and I hear more from females about this, females that have lost dear male friends because of the appearances of something.
Right.
Okay. And it's heartbreaking. I have had male friends up and stop talking to me, never gave me a reason why whatsoever, just stopped all communication with me. And I can only tell from the coolness of the wife why they stopped talking to me. Now we need to get over the appearances of things. We need to be able to, I think the more that the church would do well to start talking about male and men and women as friends and what that looks like. And then by doing that, we could maybe disabuse people of this notion that, any relationship between a man and a woman is going to naturally, devolve into some sort of illicit affair. I don't think that finding excuses that meet the rule really helps us out in the long run. I mean, it might get you through the night and you might sleep well thinking that you didn't have lunch with that female coworker because you wanted to avoid the appearances of something, but something broke in that moment. Something broke, and it's not necessarily the relationship. It's that women now get held off to a distance. I can't meet with you alone, and I can't, have lunch with you alone or get coffee with you alone because I'm scared of what people might think. Yeah. Now, this breaks down so many relationships that can be mutually building and edifying and lifting up. Iron sharpens iron, not iron sharpens itself because it keeps the other iron fire away from it. You know what I'm saying? Like we're together the image of God. There's mutuality and equality in the garden. It's not a hierarchy. It's not about sex. It's about community and the establishment of community. So I just don't, at the end of the day, like even Paul doesn't segregate men and women in the churches. There's things that we have passages where it's been argued whether or not he said certain things. But there's a mutuality of a coming together of male and female in the Christian churches, which is on equal grounds, and that's radical. And we just want to disassemble that as fast as possible because it's scary, because it's freedom, and because it's it's new territory that we have to chart, and that's okay. You know, it's okay to chart new territory, to redefine things, to understand things in new light. It's not going to be the end of the world. We have a lot of great things because someone was willing to say something that hadn't been said before. So it's not good to just default to, I think, being afraid of what people might think, or, the more we stand up against stuff like that, I think the more that we can get things to be on equal, on the ground that they should be on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's appealing to the lowest common denominator. And sure. I feel like in America especially, I feel like we do that with everything. And this is just another example of that, instead of realizing that there's nuance, right, to relationships. And there are, if you have a good circle of friends, if you have a healthy marriage, or just healthy relationships, right, you will be able to see no one's blindsided by an affair. Like, it never just, oops. I'm having an affair. Whoops. Like, no, an affair, a relationship can happen in a room full of people with doors open. It can happen. And it's just, if you as a person realize, the signs of that, if, you have accountability, that's the stuff that's important to me. I've always had really good, accountability with, my brother, good close friends. We all had our own struggles, especially as single men trying to do the right thing and trying to treat women with respect, right? But it was never we were never blindsided by a relationship. I'm been married for 12 years. I know, there's a lot of women that are friends of mine, but I've never accidentally, had an affair, but every man that I've talked to who's been in a long-term relationship, I feel like that temptation is always there for anyone, for a husband or a wife. If you're married for a long time, you're going to have ups and downs, and that kind of stuff does pop into the brain. But we're responsible grown-ups, and we should be able to shut that down or talk to someone or have that outlet instead of having it all fester inside and not know what to do or just run away from that person. Right. I feel like everyone just wants to run away and doesn't want to confront and actually deal with the situation, because it's easier just to cut a friendship off. It's easier just to walk away and not even approach a friendship.
Yeah. And I do think that we have a really, really, really difficult definition of marriage to uphold. And it's cumbersome, and it's burdensome, and I think it's more death dealing than it is life giving. And I think Sarah, I'm gonna promote Sarah once again, but she does a good job about talking about the difference between lusting after someone and having attraction for someone. And we have this idea that we're only supposed to find our spouse this most amazingly attractive human being for the rest of our lives. And I have never felt that way. I've never had that expectation on my husband. I mean, I remember one time I was very pregnant. When I get pregnant, I get very big. Very big. I mean, I'm 5'3" and I can get just shy of 200 pounds. I get big. I make big, healthy babies. All right. But anyway, so I'm about 7 months pregnant, and we're talking to this wife of a friend of ours, and she's gorgeous. She's wearing a strapless dress, and her breasts just look amazing. And so I'm sitting there, and we're talking. My husband and I are talking. And so finally we're walking to the car, and it's painfully silent. You know that silence where it's just like, something's wrong here. Just everything felt tense. So we're getting into the car, and I shut my door. I'm putting on my seatbelt around my massive belly. And I look over at my husband, and I said, I'm just going to make up a name. Like, didn't you think Jennifer's boobs were amazing? And he was like, oh. I was like, they were gorgeous. Like, I was staring at them. And he was like, his tension lifted. He was like, thank you. And I said, honey, I never expect you to find me to be the most beautiful woman in the room. Like, there are going to be so many other women that are going to top me, and I'm aware of this, and this is fine. And if you look at them, I'm probably looking at them too. Like, it's totally okay. Like, attraction is something completely different than I need to have this human being and objectify it through sexual relations. Like, there's two different things there. And I think that in the conservative church, or even in our definition of marriage, which I think is actually pervasive in the secular culture as well. It's not just a church issue at this point, but just that your spouse is supposed to complete you. Like, all of those stupid movies that say you complete me have doomed us to marriage being a ball and chain. We're heading so hardcore, and we live longer, and divorce is going to get more rampant because we're placing on our spouses something that we can't place on them. They cannot fulfill our need. My husband is a civil engineer. He can tolerate so much theological conversation. We're in a car ride for more than an hour. I get 30 minutes, like, that's it. When I'm around, we have some other mutual couples where the guy is the theologian, and then so the spouse, it's my friends Todd and Kelly. But when Todd and Kelly would hang out with us, Kelly and Daniel, my husband, would say, Todd, Lauren, you guys get 30 minutes to talk theology. Now you have to come join the rest of us. But it's just this, it's just sad to see so much destruction based off of an onerous definition of marriage. And just this idea that we're so scared of something bad happening to us that we just want to create these rules around aspects so that we can protect ourselves from the bad thing happening. Meanwhile, you don't even know if that rule can protect you from it. And that's the thing that we do whenever, like, we read about in the newspapers, we read about, or hear on the news, a family losing a toddler. There's been, over the past of years, there's been a few instances where, a family has lost a child due to something. There was the Disney World thing back in Pittsburgh. There was a Pittsburgh Zoo incident, and the comments on these websites or in response to these articles was, what was that parent thinking? Because what we want to do is we want to create a fence between us and the tragedy so that we can tell ourselves at night, this will never happen to us. The Billy Graham rule tells everyone who believes in it that an affair won't happen to them. And it's a lie, because it can't actually do that. It can't actually protect you from that tragedy. Now, I wouldn't want any marriage to fall apart because of an affair. But at the same time, we can't safe proof it 100%. And I think the more we try to do that, the more likely it is that maybe it actually will happen. And because we wind up creating a fear, and when we have those feelings of attraction for someone else outside of the marriage, then we're going to suppress them and repress them, and that's going to fester and cause a huge infection. And so it's really it's sad overall. So I went on probably a couple of different tangents there, but I'm not sure we're actually. I think that we would do well to just maybe stop everything. Raise the whole entire gender dialogue and maybe start new. Men and women can be friends. Let's start from that aspect rather than trying to say, well, history has told us that men and women can't be friends, and so now we need to work within that framework. No, the framework's broken. Get rid of it. Men and women can be friends. Let's start there.
I think when you start giving people more of a benefit of the doubt and go from there, and there's a lot of people in my life that I value a lot of relationships with a lot of men, and I value a lot of relationships with a lot of women. Everyone has spoken into my life and made me a better person. So, I have two people that are very important to me. One is male, one is female, and they both have radically altered my life. I couldn't imagine really not having them as friends. And that's how it is. And I feel like there's just different things that, my female friend brings into my life than my male friend does. And he brings in things that she can't bring in. And it's wonderful to be able to get, affirmation from a male that's not affirming you because he's trying to get something else out of you. Right. Yeah. Like, and that's, if you're friends with a guy, it's, as a woman, for me, it's absolutely amazing. It's just, and for me, it's just my world.
And I get really tired of being shunned from the group because I'm a woman. You know, in seminary, my male friends would try to set me up with their wives, which is always awkward because I would go over and I would talk with them about theology, and then I'd have no overlap. I didn't get married until much later. And so I didn't have kids. I didn't care for many of the like domestic duties that, you know, many of the women were doing. And so it was just like a deer in headlights when I'd go and talk to the women. So most of my friends on a daily basis, I'm talking with way more men than I am women. And when Sarah came into my life, I think, you know, because I told my husband, I was like, I've got a new friend. And he sort of looked at me and I said, and her name is Sarah. And he was like, whoo. You know, oh, good. I'm glad you finally have a girlfriend you can talk to. But, you know, I just see so much devastation occurring because, you know, of just a breakdown in being able to address and confront and what is wrong. I know what is wrong with even what if you were being flirtatious at some point, Sean? Mm-hmm. That's not wrong or bad. It's not like you were being flirtatious.
It's just being human.
Right. Like I like to flirt and I flirt with women as well as men, you know? So it's just, I just think that we just have this warped view, definition of marriage that is suffocating and killing internally so many people. And I have a negative view of the institution of marriage. So I've got a decent husband and we have 3 beautiful children and, things are normal. We've been married for 12 years or almost 12 years as well. So it's, things are still ticking, but it's just this whole idea of this other person completing me in everything that only works if you're going to hold to some fundamentalist understanding of gender roles.
Yeah.
And make the woman need the man. And then she's completed by his presence and she does all the things that he needs her to do. And then you can have this, we're just each other's ends. I don't think that's the majority of us, especially in an egalitarian world. We need a new definition of marriage.
Yeah, I always looked at it as my wife and I love each other, but we both have to work and we have children, and it's more of a team. We're more of a team, like Team Draeger.
Right.
Like we're both working. Where can I swoop in and help you out, and vice versa? Yeah. What do we need to do to help each other out to keep this family going and to make sure we have time to spend together and raise our children? And a lot of people are more and more open to this type of marriage. And for us, it works. But that's the thing. Like, I think everyone needs to see what works for them. Yeah. But holding a position just because you're a male, like holding that over a woman and this whole like submissive role, like there's different forms of submission, but what the fundamentalists would say a submissive role would be like, woman, don't challenge your husband. Yeah. The husband's the head. He's the one in charge basically of the theology of our family, right? What we believe. He's the teacher. Like I've never fallen into that mold. My wife hasn't either. She's fierce, strong, independent woman. Nothing's going to contain her.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to meet her.
Yeah, that would definitely have to happen because, like I said, I sent her along to read some of your writing and listen to the podcast because there's a lot of things I find similar between you and my wife. Just that, but I love that sense of independence. Like that's what attracted me to my wife.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're going in many different directions, and I need to wrap up.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think our society, my point is, with this podcast especially, is that our society, we need to embrace now more than ever the strong, independent women. And my wife's run into this quite a bit on having to just kind of being side-eyed because of how she is, her personality. And, I think this is the time for us to embrace this even more.
Yeah. With the trajectory of what's happening in the society in terms of our leadership, I think that the stronghold has to stand and become stronger because it's not a good trajectory. I don't like I always want to say machismo, but because I always mess up my CHs. I learned Italian at one point, and now I can't say certain words ever the same. And I don't know why that is. But so anyway, I always do the hard CH, especially with the I, machismo. It sounds better, right? It sounds a little bit more alluring. What is this machismo you're talking about? But anyway, yeah, I'm not a fan of it. And I think it's dangerous, in fact. So the stronghold has to stand. Yeah.
Well, my challenge to the listeners here, if you're a guy, embrace the strong women in your life, lift them up, give them a platform. And especially if you're raising daughters, I have a daughter. She's my oldest. She is a firecracker, and I want her to know she can do anything she puts her mind to. There's nothing holding her back on what she wants to do.
Men and women should be friends with each other. And and I'm tired of seeing the devastation. I'm so tired of it. And spouses, stop putting onerous pressure on yourself and on your spouses. It's just not going to end well.
Yeah.
That's dead.
All right. Lauren, thank you so much for joining me and chatting about all this.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, we have the second half of Ezer Uncaged with us now. Sarah Taras.
Hello.
So you have a mini book coming out soon, and I want to talk about that in just a little bit. But first, if we can get the mini series, the mini episode of where you've come from on your spiritual journey.
Ooh, wow.
The Cliff Notes or the I don't know.
Sure. So I come from a fundamentalist background. I was a kid in the 90s, Southern Baptist era of what would Jesus do, bracelets and Lifeway, blah, blah, blah. So I kind of, True Love Wade. So I kind of came out of that whole thing. And then, I got married, actually married my high school sweetheart when I was 19, and he and I joined a Bible church, and it was very fundamentalist, very, here in California, so John MacArthur and that whole spiel. So this was like a kind of a sister church off of that church. And so we immersed ourselves into that community for about 10 years. Lots of rules, lots of legalism, and I'd kind of had this idea that we came from sort of like a Gumby Christianity, and I just wanted to know God better and be serious about my Christianity. And I felt like these people were super serious about it. And, they seem to know a lot about the Bible, and that's kind of what I wanted. Theology has always interested me, and I love learning it. And so I kind of dove into this thing. And there's a lot in that community. There's just a lot of conformity to the community. Not a lot of gospel being preached, a lot of man laws, just a lot of law in general of how to keep God's favor. You needed to look a certain way, act a certain way, dress a certain way, talk a certain way, that whole rigmarole. And so, where wives are subjected to their husbands, they're quiet. They don't give their opinion. They don't have one apart from their husbands. They're sort of just housewives. I've talked about it in more detail on the Ezer podcast. But, I lived my life in just performance. I performed to try to get my husband to love me, because that's what I was told. If you do these things, your marriage will be successful. Your husband will adore you. God will love you. That whole thing. And so I did all of the things, and I lost myself completely. I always feared God, that he was just disappointed in me. And no matter how hard I tried not to fail. And I remember at one point just praying. I journaled back then. That was the big thing. So I remember just journaling, God, just please show me your love for me so that I can love you in return. Because I knew that was the thing that was keeping me from going to him. I would do a lot of hiding from, so I thought hiding from God and just being afraid all of the time of God. And so I started reading through the book of John, and paying really close attention to how Jesus interacted with the disciples. And what I found is that Jesus isn't anything like I was being told that he was. He was incredibly patient with sinners, with the people that didn't quite fit in with the religious, of society. And it freaked me out. I thought I was crazy. Like, wait, this isn't, all of the books that have been pre-approved for me to read aren't telling me this about Jesus. And so I don't know what to do with this. And it wasn't long after that I went through a series of miscarriages. And suffering has a way of schooling you. And soon after the miscarriages, I did have a pregnancy that stuck, but it left me flat on my back for 4 months, sick. So I couldn't cook. I couldn't grocery shop. I couldn't do all of the things that I had been keeping up to gain acceptance from my husband, gain from what I thought, and acceptance from God. All I could do was rest. And it was a struggle. It was learning literally to rest and to be okay with not being able to do anything. And I just distinctly remember laying there because I was so sick and I was on medication to keep me from ralphing all day. But it was like I couldn't watch TV, I couldn't read, I couldn't focus on anything. So I'm literally laying in one place for 4 months with my eyes closed, just holding on for dear life. And I just remember this, not an audible voice or whatever, but just this everything that needs to be done has already been done for you. Now you just rest right here in my love for you. And so it was just kind of taken what I had been seeing in scripture. And now I don't have any choice but to believe it now because everything, all of my ability has been ripped from my hands. And so, it was just so going through that and realizing how much I'm loved in my suffering, that can apply to the rest of my Christian life, So when I started feeling a bit better, it was, wait, I don't have to perform for God when I'm in the depths of suffering and despair. And I'm talking raw prayers like, God, I asked you for the other babies and you took those. Right. For real, I'm afraid to ask you for this one. Like, that's the place where you get raw and you get real, with your creator, and so it's like you have that and you can't ever go back to, and seeing how much he does love you and having your faith, just come to life in that it's not about my performance. It's about Christ's performance for me. And I'm loved, even if I just lay my ass on the couch for 4 months and don't move and don't serve and don't lift a finger and can't. That his love is still there. And so it was kind of one of those things where after the fact, it's like, wait, it clicked. This is the Christian life. I don't have to do anything. Obviously, I want to serve my neighbor. I want to love my family. I want to do those things out of, what's been done for me. But that had been flipped for a long time for me. And so it was just kind of that aha of, I often describe it as Jesus throwing me over his shoulder and running with me out of the burning building of legalism, because that's really how I feel about the whole thing. So, man. So that's kind of
awesome.
It. Really short snippet.
Nice. I know that you talk on the first episode of Ezer Uncaged. You and Lauren give your stories, and I'm sure throughout your podcast you give even more stories and things like that. Everyone who's listening, please go to write down EzerUncaged.com. EZER. There it is. Uncaged.com. Real great podcast. I'm so glad. I'm very happy that I started listening to it as well. I'm still behind. I know that Lauren asked me if I'd listened to your episode 9, Female Sexuality in the Gospel, yet. And I said, no.
Wow. I figured that'd be the first one all of the men run to.
I know, right? Yeah. I haven't listened to that yet, but as I was trying to organize us talking and schedules and everything, I noticed, I looked at the synopsis of that episode and I saw that you have a mini book that is going to be coming out in July from New Growth Press. It's called Women in Lust, Exposed, Forgiven, and Embraced. Mm-hmm. And I was very curious about what you had to say about that, because my wife and I have been very candid with each other about sexuality, and we have some really great conversations, especially lately as we both have been kind of exploring, as she's kind of jumped into an exploration phase of what her faith means to her, mm-hmm. and why she's feeling repressed, and why she'll say something in the midst of people and people give her the craziest looks because it's the most candid and raw and honest thing on her mind.
Yeah.
And that's how she is. And so I saw this. So what spurred this topic to be for this mini book? Is this your first mini book? Have you written before? I probably should have asked that before. This is
the first time I'll be published. So that's kind of an exciting thing. I've been blogging. Thanks. Yeah. And thanks for your support on Ezer. But yeah, I've been blogging for a while, especially when, grace kind of grabbed a hold of me and I started seeing Christ in a different way than I had before. There aren't a lot of people saying this stuff. So I just started kind of writing what it was I needed to hear, what I wish that I were reading from the Christian community, or from the church. And, Lauren and I became friends, and she's my editor on this mini book project.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So that was awesome to kind of work with her on that. But honestly, the mini book, I kind of joke a little bit that the mini book kind of came through coercion, through Lauren. She's an editor through New Growth Press. She was a Key Life author before I was. And she and I, she's like a sister to me, man. Like, we just have the most honest, vulnerable conversations with each other. I think that a lot of people would be jaw-dropped by if they ever heard some of the stuff. And so she knew, we handled sexuality. We talked about it a lot. And so she came to me in an email a couple years ago, and she was like, hey, I know we've talked about this subject a lot, and I think you should write on it. I think you should write on, lust and female sexuality. And here's the thing, I can't think of what it's called now, but where you submit your whatever to the publisher. And she's like, here's the form for that. And I responded in the email, like, I changed the subject completely. Like, I ignored everything she said, and I went to something else, another subject, another blog post. Hey, did you read this? Because I was wondering about this thing, and totally changed the subject on her. And it took me a little while to actually think about that. But yeah, so that's, again, one of those things where, first of all, female sexuality is never addressed in church. And when sexuality is addressed in the church, usually men are getting shamed for it, for their lust issues. And women are being told to cover their bodies because it's your fault that these men are lusting. And I always just sat there feeling like it was a double dose of condemnation, because here I am, a woman who's very sexual, has been since forever. And I do struggle with lust. And I just always found what was thundered at the men from the pulpits to be so shaming and so unhelpful, because it's like, yeah, well, we're sexual people and our sexuality is broken. Like, every part of us has brokenness to it. So it makes sense that that would include our sexuality, and we would struggle in these ways. And so my approach to the mini book is kind of twofold. Number one, it's to be the first one to start the conversation and say, hey, hold up. Women are sexual beings, and that's a gift. It's a good thing. It's not something to be ashamed of. But then also come with my confession to the table that, hey, and I'm broken in these ways. There's the way a man struggles. I struggle that way too. And, but then to not shame, not try to fix, not try to, here's your 10 steps how to stop lusting, because that's a joke. And to say, look, here's Christ for you. You don't have to run and hide from God. There is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. And I just kind of walked through a couple of Bible accounts in Scripture where Jesus is in a situation with a woman who's has known sexual shit, for all, lack of a better term, and the way that he is with them. And yes, he exposes, but he doesn't expose in shame. He says, look, this is the truth about you. Yeah, I know right. that. And I'm not leaving. I'm not going anywhere. And I think that's the thing. That's, for me, that was the game changer for me. I no longer have to run from God because of my shit. I can run to him with my shit, and he loves me in the middle of it. And so that is pretty much the premise for the mini book. It sort of kind of leads through, and I talk about it. So it's kind of like a confession, but then there's just flat out absolution. I think Lauren was laughing because she's like, man, you landed this thing on a word of absolution. Go in peace. Like, your sins are forgiven you. Your faith has saved you. Go in peace. And so that's kind of what I wanted to do. It's a short book. You can read it probably in about 30 minutes. Just kind of takes you through quickly. We did that for a couple of reasons. One, how are women, how's the church going to be receptive to such a thing? And number two, I'm new to having things published. And so we're doing this with hopes of doing a bigger project next. But we'll see, I mean, at the end of the day, hey, here's a good word for you and your struggle, and Christ is for you. And so, hopefully that's what women get out of it. I've sent it to a friend of mine ahead of time that is male, and I was like, does this help you as a man? And he was like, yeah, it does. Like, the gospel is totally here. And so it was an encouragement for him. Mm-hmm. So, but it's definitely geared towards women, because we've been largely ignored in lots of ways, but this is just one of them.
I find that very interesting because the only time I feel like some sort of sexuality would get brought up would be like at a women's conference, maybe a marriage conference. I've never been to a marriage conference, so I don't know. My wife and I don't really have a problem trying to find our physical romance. So for us, it's never been an issue, and my wife's very candid about this stuff with me. So it's kind of in relationships, like serious marriage relationship, like that's all I've ever known is I've married a strong woman who's very open and honest about her sexuality and everything. And she, like, I remember when I met her, she was feeling this condemnation, guilt on, previous sexual experiences she had before she was married and everything. And I was like, well, I didn't marry you then. I mean, it was like, I married you now, number one. And I was like, but none of that matters, because I'm here now, and, we've committed to each other. And I was like, it's a completely different ballgame. You don't even have to feel any condemnation. I was like, so having that, like, our marriage start like that, I feel was very freeing for her, and it's kind of set us off on the right foot. And I think, I don't know, like, I've only been kind of confused when talk about, especially like I guess a marriage relationship sex would be stifled in the church. Mm-hmm. And I feel like with guys, it's always like Christian guys. And whenever I was in those conversations, they would feel like kind of tread around, and then someone would say like a kind of sort of dirty joke, and it would be like, whoa,
Yeah.
But I mean, I hope my dad's okay with me sharing this, but it's just something that has stuck with me. He was in some sort of argument with elders in a church we used to go to when I was a kid. I think I was in high school, and I remember that the elders said, he needs to get in line. There's probably some sin in his life, and it's probably because he masturbates.
Oh my gosh.
Like that specific.
Oh, yeah.
I was like,
wow.
So that's always stuck with me, that it was like, okay, so that's the deal breaker. There's no hope for me. So it's good that books like this, even if it's just a conversation starter. There was a podcast called with 3 Christian women called The Wednesday Nooner. Have you heard of that?
No, but that sounds fun.
I'm not sure if they're still doing it. It was a couple years back. Fantastic.
Nice.
These 3 women talking about a women's view of sex and sexuality and women's issues, and it was great. And I think they were on a podcast I had listened to it at a certain time, and I had to make a note. I need to check this out. I need to let my wife know about it. So I feel like the conversation is starting to get out there more in, I guess, Christian circles, but it's even in secular circles. I'm using secular and Christian terms. I'm sorry. I always try to avoid using those terms, but
yeah,
even in, our society today, these issues, it's still coming up left and right. And I think that is important I feel like it's a harder road, I feel like, with most women trying to get out there and talk about this stuff than it is a man, which is very unfortunate. And I feel like the conversation's changing.
Yeah, definitely.
So do you see that progression as far as, do you find it easier to talk about that stuff? Have you gotten pushback yet? Because I know the more you get out there, the more pushback you'll all of a sudden these bros will find your work. I see it happening with a few women authors that I follow, and
and here's the thing: you have, if you want to use secular and Christian or whatever, but even within Christendom, you have the liberal side, and I feel like they've been ahead of the game on this for a while. It's the conservative side of Christendom that is like terrified of sex, or they turn it into this super weird thing. And so, like, the books, when I was kind of thinking through the mini, and the book proposal that I actually put forth was for a full book. And I honestly, the only thing I found that was worth a damn was all from like the more liberal side, which is helpful because they aren't afraid of psychology either. And so it's like, wow, you're looking at the whole person, not just, some like, I don't know, whatever it is, the conservative side typically kind of tries to handle everything through a fear lens. Like, oh, we're scared that if we tell you it's okay to masturbate, you're going to do crazy things. It's like, that is the fear. It's like masturbation. Right. And I blew that out of the water. Lauren and I did on Ezer. We're just like, you know what? Here's the deal.
Good. I feel like this should be like, this stuff needs to be discussed.
It does. It's right. I mean, because there is such a thing as a healthy sexuality, and it's not something to be feared. And I get the ways that, we are just broken in ways, I understand that. And, but instead of like shaming it or being weird about it, like just be honest and confess those things and, let's talk about them. But yeah, I mean, I haven't really, as far as pushback, I haven't had any of that yet. I imagine it's coming. I'm, and writing anything, it's like just having an unedited nude of yourself floating around in the world anyway. So I'm kind of starting to feel that like anticipation as this is coming out, that I'm going to feel even more that way. And I'm sure that people on the more conservative side are going to start to panic. But honestly, every conversation that I've had leading up to this point has been so positive, and especially with women that are in the more conservative churches are like breathing a sigh of relief and going, oh my gosh, you have no idea what you just said to me, and that's not That's just me saying, dude, God made you. You're created a sexual being. That's a good thing. I mean, just that, Sean, is like, yeah. I am, like they're hungry. They've been so, right. Every part of them has been shamed. Their body's been shamed. Their sexuality's been shamed. I mean, just everything. And so, so far, the conversations have been good. Of course, men tend to just be super curious, and that can get awkward. So I'm navigating. I've had to navigate
Would Billy Graham approve of this conversation right now?
No.
I'm not sure.
Well, I don't know. I can't see you, and you're in another state.
We're safe. Right.
We might be safe. We might.
If we were video Skyping, it'd be a different scenario.
Yeah, he'd probably frown upon us at that point. We would definitely be into some adulterous territory at that point.
We may need a good stern talking to. Or
accountability partners.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Here's the thing with, I feel like most women feel alone, and I'm spitballing here. I'm a white heterosexual male. I know nothing about being a woman. And I do know from the outside looking in with being married, right? Like I've seen, like my wife's body has been run through the ringer with having 3 children, and she's all like the pressure that women have to, you got to get that post-pregnancy body back and all this stuff, and this focus on image is something that I know that plagues her, and and she never believes me when I say, no, you're enough, you are, and I feel like I don't know. I talk to other men, and the other men in our lives, in our circle of friends, seem to be very supportive of their wives as well. But I want to say to any guy that's listening, like, if you haven't told your wife that, like, she is enough, like, you need to do that more, number one. And what advice would you give, I guess, women kind of navigating that? Because this is something I feel like, I feel like every woman, especially in the United States, deals with this.
Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I actually shared a video on my Facebook this past week. It was on bathing suits, and it was all these different size, shapes of women putting on bathing suits and saying, like, this is so frustrating. Like, we don't look like that whole beach body thing. Like, we don't look like we're supposed to look. And then, but it's funny because each of them, I'm sitting there looking at them all being different, ethnicities and sizes. And I'm going, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful about her. And this is so beautiful about her. And this, like, I'm not seeing the thing that they're seeing that's causing tears as they have these bathing suits on. But I know how hard I am on myself. And I think you're right. I mean, I think all women, whether you've had babies or not, there's just this idea of what the ideal body, the ideal female body is supposed to look like. And it sucks. Have I figured out the thing that is the cure for that? Honestly, I'll be for real. Like, I haven't found that thing except just to, like, I take notice of my friends and their bodies and the things that they say they hate. And I'm constantly like, dude, no, like, because I have this friend that she's like, I have the biggest butt. And I'm like, I freaking love your butt. Like, I have butt envy. I don't understand, And so, I've started, and I had this conversation with my daughter recently that, what, like, I've just started talking to myself in my head the way that I would talk to my friend, and I actually had that conversation, like I said, with my daughter recently that, as she's starting to not necessarily pick up her body yet, but just her personality or whatever, because she's she's very individualistic. It's really neat to see. She definitely kind of goes to the beat of her own drum, and encouraging her in that. And I'm like, dude, if your best friend was talking about herself, or if someone else was talking about your friend the way you're talking about you, how would you feel? And she was just like, jaw dropped. And she was like, oh, I'd be pissed.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, then you and I need to start getting pissed that we would talk about ourselves that way, you know? And so I don't know, that's kind of where I'm going right now. Like I struggle, like last summer, like I was really fit and I got hit with asthma this year. And so I'm just not. And at first I was kind of bummed. I'm like, what? Sarah, come on. Like, you know, cause my thighs are a little bigger. And it's like, no, like girl, rock them thighs, rock it. Like, stop. Like, you know, and so, yeah, I mean, I definitely think like men, husbands, boyfriends, whatever, being encouraging. But I think we need to change our inner dialogue and talk to ourselves that way too. Because honestly, if your inner dialogue is super negative, I think it's hard to hear someone else tell you what they see because you're going to kind of, oh, sure. You know, so yes, it's awesome and men should be encouraging in that. But women have to change their inner dialogue to themselves as well. And I think it's just going to be a battle. Like, I don't know. Like, you know, but I think talking about it and voicing it and hearing that you're not alone in that whole body shaming inner dialogue that you have, like everyone has that, is helpful. I don't know. I don't know if that's super feminist of me. I don't know.
I don't know.
Or not, whatever. That's the acceptable answer.
Self-worth is definitely important. And I can see the frustration because I think dads and men get a pass. It's like, oh, the dad bod is in now. And things like that, you know.
Where's the mom bod? I need the mom bod.
Yeah, I mean, come on. I mean, so it's the dichotomy or I don't know, it's the differences are there, and I think being aware of all that is good and helpful, and keeping the conversation going is something that I try to do with my wife. I have a daughter who's 11. She's going to be 12 this year, so we're about to get in some shit.
Yes, my daughter's 12, about to be 13. So, son, I'm gonna pray for you because it's brutal.
So there's and what I as a man, like showing like. I'm the example of a man in her life, so I'm constantly thinking about that, and I think that's helped me become more supportive. And I mean, I'm not. Just the other day, my wife got super pissed at me because I said something idiotic and sexist and stupid. So I'm not like saying that I'm perfect at all.
Right.
I was in the doghouse for a good day and a half. I probably still am a little bit.
That's funny. Yeah.
But we're fighting against a culture that has perpetuated this male dominance, this misogynistic idea through film and music, and we're at a point now where I think a lot of women and men together are fighting back against that perception, which is important. I don't say that I'm a feminist. I don't like when guys are like, I'm a feminist. I'm like, man, you have no idea what it's. You support feminism. I can give you that, but you're not a feminist yourself. Don't take that away from women too. Okay. That's
funny. See, and even me, I'm like, I'm a budding feminist. Like I'm getting there. Like even I'm afraid to own that feminist card. Like I think I get it. And then I'm like, oh, Sarah.
Well, the dialogue's important. And I want to thank you for keeping the dialogue going. Your book is called Women and Lust, Exposed, Forgiven, and Embraced. People can find it over at sarahtaras.com. It's through New Growth Press, so there'll be a link in the show notes there as well. And of course, Ezer Uncaged. Check out the podcast, Ezer Uncaged.com. Sarah, thank you so much for spending some time with me today.
Yeah, Sean, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Well, that's going to do it for this week's episode. I want to thank Lauren R.E. Larkin and Sarah Taras of Ezer Uncaged for joining me on this episode. Please check out their podcast, Ezer Uncaged, Ezer Uncaged. Search for it in iTunes. You'll find it or any of your podcast catchers. You can also check them out at AzerUncaged.com. All these links will be in the show notes. And it's just fantastic perspective, fantastic podcast from these two ladies. A lot of great interviews coming up the next few weeks here based around the topic of feminism. I got to be honest, I was extremely terrified to tackle this subject, but I have a lot of strong, and interesting women to talk to, and they're making it a lot easier for me as I'm kind of on this journey myself to understand and hopefully become more of a feminist myself. I'm gonna go ahead and say that. Please check out back episodes of the podcast over at theaxpx.com, as well as links to all of our social media. Again, if you would like to become a patron saint, it's only $1 a month. That's over at our Patreon, patreon.com/theaxpx. I want to thank all of you for listening, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.